And it looks like, if I'm not mistaken, we are live. It's a Monday morning, 10:43. Scientifically proven to be the best time to record a podcast. So Matt Woodard of Scalr, welcome, my friend. How are you?
Mate, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me along. I've just had my second coffee, so I'm ready to get into this.
Holy jolly! I think anyone in TA circles in Melbourne will probably know that we know each other. And again, one of the golden rules of doing a podcast is have people you know on. Lessen the risk, but also nobody else wants to talk to you. But for people who don't know, you do want to give us just a sort of 30-second sort of snapshot?
Sure, of course, yeah. We obviously we go way back now, but I've been in recruitment for 15, 16 years now. Mostly the last 10 or so have been within fast scaling tech businesses.
Yep.
So we met originally, I think, when I was at Zendesk, and we did some really interesting work together, actually.
Yep.
And then I subsequently moved on to Scalr Build, helped build that business from the ground up in Australia, and then more recently have started my own thing, Scalr. So it's a TA advisory business, but yeah, it's been a long time, and obviously we know each other from the Melbourne Recruitment Meetup as well, which we've been running for the last, I guess, seven or so years. The award-winning Meetup, I must say. And Simon's, you've been a really good supporter of the meetups. You sponsored it, you've spoken on a couple of occasions, have been a big champion of it. So yeah, very grateful for that as well.
Thank you, my friend. Yeah, getting invited back to speak again was a surprise, got to admit. So thank you. Wasn't sure after the first one, but so interesting conversation to have today. In the last, I think it's probably in the last of 3 months or so, with the advent of the noise around AI and particularly ChatGPT and generative AI as a whole, more and more conversations I've been having with talent teams have sort of centered around conversations along the lines of, what do you see as the applications of AI in talent? What are the implications of AI for talent acquisition? And I think there's endless possibilities. I think you're pretty much only limited by your imagination. But the one thing I sort of come back to is that any new tech you're introducing, any new processes you're introducing, probably need to tie into a talent strategy of some kind, which I don't think is sort of unreasonable or totally groundbreaking. But quite often when I make this comment, I kind of sometimes get a bit of a blank stare in return, and people thinking obviously to themselves, yeah, we should probably think about a talent strategy first before we start investing in time or money into more tools and tech. So I guess the question I had for you, a couple of questions, is what is a talent strategy? When do you know when you need one? And three, where do you start if you've never rolled one out before?
It's interesting because we had a recruitment meetup a week or two ago about employer branding and EVP, and it's one of those things that similar to talent strategy, that you kind of hear the phrase and you kind of get a little bit freaked out. You're like, well, that's obviously quite a complicated thing. How do I couldn't possibly do this and start this by myself. But really, maybe it's us recruiters making things seem more mystical and complicated than they are. So we stay within a job. But really, a talent strategy is just it's a plan. It's a roadmap for your organization's workforce. It's something that's well thought out and aligns with the overall company strategy. I think that's something to really point out. It's a plan for the talent acquisition that aligns overall talent that aligns with the overall company goals, and it really focuses around things like how you attract people, what's your sort of go-to-market message, how you nurture them through their life cycle within the business, and I guess how you retain them as well, more broadly in across the talent strategy. But in simple terms, when I was prepping for this, I was like, how can I crystallize it? And it's asking questions like, really simple, but how do we find the best people for our team? Where are they? Where do they go? And why do they want to work for us? How do we help them grow and stay motivated? How can we make sure we're holding on to the best talent available in the market and continue to support them in a way that makes them want to stay in longer? I guess how can we make sure that evolve as the organization grows, that the strategy evolves with the organization as well.
Brilliant. So is what you're saying then, the talent strategy starts at the beginning of how we're going to find these people, where are they now, then how do we attract them to us, how do we make them interested to us, but then it moves into, once we've hired them, how do we keep hold of them, build them careers, and build an environment that makes them want to stay. And then this thing is a moving plan as a business evolves and changes and grows, whether that's the business strategy or even just the volume of people. Maybe how you look after 50 people, it might be different to 1,000 people, for example.
It's exactly it. Yeah, when you start with your plan. Obviously, if you've got a smaller organisation, where we had with Scalr and Build, the initial plan was to get traction in the Australian market. And how do we do that within the talent acquisition space? How can we seem attractive and an organization of choice, basically coming from a standing start. But as you say, then so the initial sort of year or two would be to identify the key hires to help you sort of establish the business in the market, and then help you grow from there. Then obviously year 2, year 3 is much more about building on that solid foundation, and then growing and scaling the business from there. So yeah, absolutely, your plan would change and would evolve as the business does as well.
Yeah. So should pretty much every business have some kind of talent strategy, do you think?
I think if you don't, you're basically steering a ship without a rudder. I think it's incredibly essential that even no matter what stage of a life cycle you're at with an organization, that you have at least a loose plan around how you're going to achieve your longer term goals. And I think the space that I'm working in at the moment with startups and scale up businesses, I had a stat the other day that about 90% of startups fail, and I think a big part of that is that they don't have that plan in place from the beginning. They have an idea, and that's great. But often a lot of these companies don't go into business because they want to do talent acquisition. They just have this idea, and then they sort of bring people on they know to help them with that. But oftentimes that means that businesses are starting from a position of weakness, because they've hired similar people. They haven't actually addressed what they need in the sort of even short to medium term in terms of talent, how they can create that diversity early within the business, actually set themselves up for that success, meaning that they're coming from a sort of disadvantage later on when they realize, damn, we haven't got things in place as we should have done. So I think even just having a loose plan at the beginning is pretty important to help you have something to grow from.
Yeah, I think we being people, our species, we all default to what's easy and the most comfortable to start with. And when you're an early stage business or starting a podcast, leveraging people and known quantities is probably easier and quicker to hire than actually having a strategy, having a plan. And I've posted about it umpteen times. Recruiting is one of those things that everybody seems to have an opinion about, but until you actually do it, you don't realize how challenging it actually is to hire people.
Yeah,
maybe a little bit easier at the moment, given the in the tech space, given the year we've had, or not, depending on what you're hiring. But in general, in a challenging market, if you don't have some kind of plan, you're just making life unnecessarily hard for yourself.
Oh, exactly. And I think the other key things to point out is that a lot of organizations, will be starting, relatively unknown and will need to get some traction. So I think actually doing it this way, there's a lot of advantages to having a bit of a plan, because I think it helps create a unified and agreed approach. Certainly across a leadership team, so everyone has clear goals and expectations for where their focus and energy will be exerted, and what success looks like. I think that's the thing as well. You have this clear plan around actually what success looks like from an talent acquisition perspective. and I guess it's obviously it's really important that you have this clarity and this unified approach when you go into market, so that you have this, everyone has a clear sense of exactly what they're looking for and why.
Yeah.
For a business, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going off topic slightly. I think there's probably never been a better time to start a business than right now, with the amount of people that you can leverage. Like in the role you're doing at times, a fractional head of talent, you get a fractional CIO, a fractional CTO, fractional HR leader, because these things that we're talking about, but some of these broader business challenges that smaller organizations might look at and go, we need a head of HR, but we're not big enough to justify one, but we want all the benefit, or we know we're going to need a CFO at some stage, but we can't afford one. Having someone on a fractional sort of basis can really help you solve some of those problems and sort of set you up for success in the future. So again, going off topic slightly, but I think there's never been a better time, certainly in Australia, than if you're doing something to do it now. Cool. So going back to talent strategy, then where does a business start? Let's assume you're 15, 20 people in a business. You sort of grown over the last few years, but this year is going to be a year that you take that next leap. Where do you start with a talent strategy?
I think the important thing is to understand how and where the business wants to grow. I think having that clarity in terms of the workforce plan enables talent acquisition to be able to sort of identify within that plan what the key hires are and the key timings around that, so that they can create a solid plan in order to hire those people. I think understanding how the business wants to grow and develop means that talent acquisition can be a key supporter of that in terms of recruitment, marketing, branding, and all the sort of things that actually support the wider functions, but from an attraction perspective. So I think it just means that you get assessing the current plans and understanding where the future needs are is the first step, basically.
Yeah. So, and I think you summed it up earlier. Understanding what the business strategy is, the first thing, because if the two aren't working together, if the talent strategy isn't supporting the business, then you kind of do these things in isolation, and sooner or later it's going to come unstuck and people go, hang on, this isn't working. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So we understand what the business is trying to achieve, and there's been discussions internally about the hires we need to make, when they're going to happen in order for that business strategy to be realized. What happens then?
It's important to define clearly within the TA team, whether it's a small or slightly larger team, exactly what the goals are. Make sure that everybody's bought into this plan. They have clarity and then a unified approach. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Then I think it's important that you go out as you do your research. You sort of identify who's doing what in the market. You understand how competitive certain niches are for the kind of talent you're looking for, and I think that informs then to your timings and your planning around actually how you go and attract these people. If, for example, you know that you're looking for really niche roles for some sort of new developing tech, a no-code developer, for example, they're pretty thin on the ground. So that if you need someone within 6 months, you need to actually start this now, and you get a solid understanding of who's doing that, who has these people, and how long it's taking, and what else is happening in the market in terms of that sort of competitiveness. Obviously we're in a slightly different phase to where we were with peak COVID, where you couldn't find anybody, and there is a little bit more talent available at the moment. So I guess then that plays a little bit more into to your planning as well.
Gotcha. So this is talent team, regardless of how big it is, keeping the business up to date with things that might impact their ability to deliver the headcount needed, which would have the knock-on effect of then impacting the business's ability to deliver upon the strategy that they've already spoken about.
That's it, exactly.
This makes sense. This is easy. Like, why can't people do this?
Again, I think it's just one of those things that it seems like it's too hard. It's in the too
Yeah.
hard basket. We'll just muddle through. We'll get recruiters, agency recruiters to do this for us. So it's not something that we need to think about. And and agency recruiters have a place, but I think the more sophisticated agency recruiters these days are actually being a lot more consultative in the work that they're doing as well, and actually advising around, appreciating that the relationships they have with these organizations aren't going to last forever. Similar to yourself, right? You know that there's only a finite length of time that you work with these clients, because they will ultimately want to do their own thing. So actually helping them and providing that advice and setting them up for success is actually the best thing you could be doing for that relationship in the long term. Yeah.
And I guess I actually had a conversation, I think last Thursday or Friday, with a client, a new role that we're hiring for them, and I did some research. The roles in Sydney, and they were kind of startled to find out there were 52 other roles very similar to theirs being advertised in the Sydney market right now. So then that just gave us the ability to have a conversation around how we might need to think differently about, one, what we're offering for the role in terms of benefit, salary, and all that sort of stuff, but also talking about flexibility. Like, what are the things that we're prepared to compromise on? Can we compromise on how much we're prepared to pay someone? Are we prepared to compromise on how long we're willing to wait for somebody to come on board? Are we able to compromise on the skill set demand that we've got for the role? In other words, do we need to change the role slightly? There's generally the ability to compromise on something, but if you don't understand what you're competing against, I think to your point, then you don't know what you need to compromise on. And then the scenario can occur where suddenly you've got to compromise on something at the last minute. You don't necessarily have all the info, and people suddenly feel panicked and rushed, and that's never when the best, I think, decisions are made.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to blow smoke up your ass here, mate. But you did this amazing Helix a year or two ago, which it defines all of the things that a recruiter does, and it's significant, it's massive, and it was hugely valuable, and I've used it a lot, and I've claimed credit for it as well. So
Good.
Thank you. But within it, it just demonstrated how much a TA function does and the impact it has on the wider business, which is why getting all these TA team people being made redundant this year has been such a such a sort of false economy in my eyes. But anyway, the point is that you, by having a clearly defined talent strategy, talent acquisition strategy, you actually know that you mean that you can really deep dive into those key areas that need to be focused on in order to help attract people to the business.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other key thing about this as well, is that you're creating a consistency, you're creating that buy-in within your team and within the leadership team for the business.
Yeah.
That this is the plan. This is how we're going to execute, and this is how we're going to do it. You've gone and done your research, and then another sort of facet would be then the recruitment marketing, and actually going to market and then identifying these people and finding out and researching where these people hang out. Because while obviously recruiters, you and I, it's LinkedIn recruiter is our bread and butter. LinkedIn, we're on it on a daily basis, but that's not where these people hang out. Software engineers, developers, marketers, those kind of people don't hang out there. So it's understanding where those people are and how you can reach out to them and track them and that sort of thing. So there's all these steps within this, the talent acquisition strategy, which kind of trigger once it's been agreed.
I had a very similar conversation a week or so ago, and I made the comment, and it was just sort of this passing comment, and afterwards I thought that's actually quite profound. Is that, like, talent very rarely just turns up unless you're one of very few brands in the world that pretty much anyone in your space, so in our space tech, there's very few brands that pretty much anyone would be interested in working at. It's probably a handful. But for most businesses, they don't have that luxury. So talent doesn't just arrive. It takes effort to get them there. And I think that effort is underestimated. The time frames, the the inputs of time from hiring teams, hiring managers, HR teams, all going together to make this happen is way bigger than I think people realize. Touching on something you mentioned there as well, the employer brand / employer marketing. Again, we see it spoken about a lot, but I think a lot of businesses sort of get a little bit like mystified by it. Not as hard to activate something as people would think.
No, not at all. In fact, as I mentioned, we had the wonderful Keela Cervelli and Andrew Griffiths from Zip talking about, and Keela really broke it down in the simplest way. She said, like, having this Excel spreadsheet with 5 key questions about the business. Things like, why do you want to work here? What would make you stay? What would make you leave? Like, really simple questions. And you can just plot that on a Excel spreadsheet. You identify the themes, and that's kind of the start of your EVP. That's what people are staying in the business for. That's what you've been known for.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously a bit more complexity to it as you get further into it, but as a starting point, it's really, really simple.
Yeah.
And I think anybody in a TA function, if whether they've done it or not, can sort of start from a really low base and sort of evolve it from there. But anything they do in that space would definitely add value to the organization.
I love that idea of finding the themes amongst your teams and your people, and just building on those, because if they're the things that your current team love, they're probably the things that your future hire is going to love as well. Perfect. I know you've got 12 points. We've probably covered two or three of them. What else can businesses do? They've identified the business need. Talent have gone out and done some research. They've started thinking about some of the acquisition strategies. What else should they be doing?
I think once you've got a clearly defined sourcing plan and selection process and employer, and getting a thought around your employer brand, I think it's then on the TA team to go and do their thing. I think they then hit the market with feeling empowered and feeling confident that they know exactly what they need. I think creating candidate personas, I think, is another key thing as well. There's a lot of talent in the market, but actually really clearly defining what it is that an organization needs for that period of time of an organization. As I said, we've talked about sort of startups to all the way through to sort of more established businesses. So understanding exactly what that candidate persona looks like, exactly what the key behaviors and the key skills and strengths look like at each point of the development is really, really key. Again, it means that the TA team can then go to market confident that they are meeting the immediate needs of the organization from a talent perspective. So I think that is a key thing as well.
Yeah.
Having clear metrics and KPIs in place so that we know what success looks like from a talent acquisition perspective. And then obviously once you've started to do that, it's then going back on a quarterly basis and reviewing and seeing how you're tracking and where you might need to exert extra focus or less focus. I think it's an ongoing conversation, but it's very much a guide and something fluid which you use to sort of help steer you towards the ultimate goals for the business for the year.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to fall into the trap of thinking that all talent plans and talent teams and talent strategies should be copies of each other, when every business is different. Every business thinks differently about people. All your hiring teams are different. They have different competence when it comes to interviewing and providing feedback. But having this place to start, an understanding of this is our very brief template, and now we need to fill in the detail based on our capability and our budget. Sometimes lean into it as well, and the bandwidth we've got for all these things. I think it proves that it's an investment of time to make this stuff happen properly, but you've got to start somewhere, right?
100%. I think it's definitely it's a little bit of heavy lifting at the beginning, but once you've got it in place for year one, then it's an evolution. It's okay. What worked well? What do we need to keep? Where did we miss? What are the gaps? How's the business changed? What's happening there? What are your requirements going forward? How can we adapt to make sure that we continue to align with the business and we continue to deliver the value that TA we know we can.
Just going back to your comment around personas again, I think just for anyone who's perhaps not familiar with that thinking, if we were going to talk about an early stage business, year one or year two, the type of person that's going to suit that business is going to be totally different to the type of person who's probably going to suit years 3 to 5, for example. So things like a lot of ambiguity, quite often no process or policy around things. That whole classic, build the ship as you fly it kind of thing. That's not for everybody. A lot of people, particularly working in bigger businesses, like having very defined roles, very defined boundaries, very defined guidelines. This is what you do as your job. So if you're trying to talk to them about a year one business, it's probably the wrong persona. So recognizing these behaviors, I think you call them, super important. I think something that a lot of businesses overlook.
100%. It's I guess a startup, they've maybe just got some funding and they're like, shit, we need to grow. Let's just hire anybody who is interested in working for us. Let's just hire and we'll kind of make it work. But I think that's that's why a lot of these startups fail, because they haven't got the right people and they haven't got the right thinking in place to start with. When you were talking, you made me think about Slalom Build. I joined that journey as employee number 4 for Slalom Build, and as an Australian business, grew it to nearly 300. And for me, I got sort of 2 years in, and the feeling started to be that the sort of the juggernaut had started to slow down, and it was becoming a lot more business as usual. And I think that for me was sort of signal to sort of get out and do something different, where I actually could help build and grow something from scratch again. And I noticed that there was some of my early stage colleagues did similar, but then they also started to really get some traction in terms of people coming in from a slightly different mindset, who are happy just to come and kind of steady the ship and keep things tracking, kind of evolve what had already been built. So I remember that was a very obvious sort of sign. So yeah, absolutely. Identifying the sort of the skills, the experience, motivations, preferences are key things. Otherwise, you could have someone who's an absolutely fantastic operator, but just come into a business at the wrong stage and can fail. So I think it's really important that you've got that clearly defined at the beginning, so that you understand what good looks like for the now.
Yeah. And do you think that's why when you sometimes talk to people at businesses that they've moved out of startup phase, and you might talk to people who work there, and they say things like, it's not like it used to be. It's not like back in the old days. It's a lot slower, because businesses change and evolve as they get bigger, and they become more risk averse because you've got more people, and suddenly they've got more paying clients. You need to manage money and projects and things differently. They just evolve, and that evolution isn't for everyone, is it?
No, and you're right, and it's like when you sort of try and describe the culture should be this ever fluid, moving thing, because as more people join the business, the culture needs to change. The culture and environment with a 10-person business is going to be a lot. You'd hope a lot closer knit versus 100 people, where there's 100 different opinions and different versions of what good looks like or what a culture looks like. It's an ongoing and evolving thing. I think that's the sort of, that's why a lot of businesses are successful, because they identify that and they evolve and they allow the culture to grow from there. It's those kind of things.
Yeah. And so when we take all those things into account, talent strategy is evolving as well, because the needs of the business are changing.
Yeah, it has to. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, initially, your talent TA strategy might be like identifying key hires and really just sort of headhunting those things because you don't have the brand to attract the broader audience. Whereas year 2, year 3, that will have changed. And in the case of Slalom, that had changed, and then they became an employer of choice. So your strategy changes again.
Yeah.
And then you could be a little more selective about the kinds of people you want, and you could be a bit more targeted and deliberate about hiring and that sort of thing. But at the beginning, it is a scramble. But making sure that you get the right people at the beginning is critical for your success.
Yeah, but also I think sometimes the market's perception of you as a business can change as well. Do you remember at Zendesk having people applying for roles, and you'd ask them why they applied, and they'd say, because I want to work at a startup. And Zendesk at the time was 7 years old, and you sort of look at people going,
200
we're
people,
not a startup. But their perceptions of what the business was are sometimes not right either. So there's opportunity there as well, isn't there, to get this stuff right?
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Yeah. What are the other big things that sort of factor into a talent strategy, do you think?
I think clear communications is the other key thing as well. Making sure you're feeding back to the business, that you're not just sort of focused in in a TA silo. That you're actually communicating with the wider business on an ongoing basis what you're hearing and what the market is doing, whether things have changed. Over the last 6-9 months, things have really changed. So understanding what that looks like, what that means to your business, and how that affects the way that you can execute your talent acquisition strategy. Making sure that the leaders and key decision makers, hiring managers are fully across that, so that it's not a surprise when you can't hire the 30 developers that you're looking for, or your salaries don't compete anymore. So making sure that there's an ongoing dialogue with the business, so there's that clarity. And making sure that based off the back of that you're continuing to evolve and optimize your plan to suit. I think we touched on it earlier, but that will be the other key thing as well. Making sure that that you are sort of applying these changes in the market, and you're applying different best practices as needed to make sure that your ability to go to market remains competitive, that you're continuing to release content which is appealing to the right audiences, and all those sort of things which actually help to achieve your goals. As I said, it's not a static plan, and it shouldn't be. It should very much be an ongoing thing, and if you're not sort of checking on at least a quarterly basis to see how you're tracking, then you may end up being way off where you needed to be in the end.
So I think all this really means is that talent is an enabler for the business. The talent function enables the business to achieve what it needs to achieve, whether it's growth or sales or headcount, like whatever it is. The talent team, it's one person or lots of people, enables the business to go off and do that.
Yeah, I think.
Who knew?
Who knew, mate? I mean, we did, but I think even in the 10 or so years that I've 15 years I've worked in recruitment, and internal recruitment has evolved so much. Even for my first job, for internal job for PwC back in New Zealand, being very much feeling like a support function, and a cost center to the business. Actually, now to where we are now, in terms of being an integral partner of the business. I think it's been heartening to see TA coming out from under the HR's wing and actually having a seat at the table. And I think it's critical for businesses to continue to support that, because I think the value that TA adds is significant, not just in hiring people. That's just hiring is just as your Helix shared, and you should share that again. It's just a tiny part of this overall massive function that the TA offers.
Hiring is just this one small component. This all makes sense, and I'm hoping that anyone watching or listening will think that it makes some sense as well. Slight sidestep, because it's a question I get asked all the time. I never know how to answer it. How's the market? What are your predictions?
Well,
just to make it harder.
I did an article for Job Adder a month or so ago, and and honestly, the market this year has been pretty bad. I think that's the politest way of saying it.
Yeah.
I was unfortunately made redundant in March, and having so this is about 6 months now, and I think in that last 6 months, I've seen less than 5 TA leadership roles. So it really does seem like it is pretty tight out there. A lot more people are being made redundant in TA, but there's just very, very few kind of leadership roles out there. So I think it's pretty tight. I was expecting there to be a little bit of a bounce in FY, start of FY24, but it still seems quite tight. So I think that will continue. It seems like that will continue for the rest of the year. I guess we're getting to that sticky point, aren't we, in the next 4 to 6 weeks where things do start to slow down, traditionally start to slow down, whether we see it this year. So I think it will be slower, but from what I'm hearing, the market is likely to pick up new year. So I guess we're all keeping our fingers crossed for that, because there is some really good talent in the market at the moment, and I'm still hearing from VCs that there's money available. It's a little bit slower, I think, the process to achieve, but there is still money out there, which means that there is still going to be the need for businesses to hire, and therefore, doing things themselves is an important thing, which means that TA should be in demand soon enough as well.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of people I've spoken to in the UK over the last few weeks who, in the recruitment space, have seen their job numbers really rising. So I think that's a good sign. I've also seen some of the RPO providers state that they're hiring pretty heavily as well. So I think that's a good lead indicator that if they're starting to have good quality conversations with their targets or their client base, and they're hearing there's good sentiment in the market and they're starting to hire. I think we're generally a few months behind the UK. So I'm with you. I think a lot of people are racing to just want to get to Christmas, which when you see mince pies in the shops already, guilty, had some at the weekend. I think when you're seeing that, you realize Christmas really isn't that far away. I think 10 weeks until Christmas. And then I think get the Christmas holidays out of the way. I think February will really start hopefully seeing some real traction in the market.
Let's hope so. Yeah.
Anything else? Have we missed anything in terms of the talent strategy side of things?
I think the final thing I would add, and it's important to do this, and it's something that I think within TA and certainly it seems I've had, that we're not very good at celebrating success. So I think that's the other thing as well. I think it's important that you that within that function, within that TA strategy, you sort of acknowledge when you've been successful and you really celebrate it. I think that's the one thing, is that there's always genuinely internally, there's always people when things are really pumped, really buzzing, that there's always another role to fill. So you actually sort of stopping and smelling the flowers and celebrating success, I think is the key thing, because if you've been successful, it generally means the business has been successful. It means they've got the talent and the quality that they need to then help grow their business and further. So I think it's actually appreciating the value you add to the business and celebrating that success.
Yeah, if sales teams get to celebrate client wins and all that sort of stuff, then TA should be celebrating when they've hit milestones and the KPIs as well, right?
100%. 100%. Yeah. But as I said, it's always one of those things that we're never been very good at, At Scalr, we hired nearly 300 people in 2 years, and it was just like, okay, cool. Well, I still need to hire this one and this one. It's just that ongoing thing, right? But actually stopping and celebrating success is an important thing to do.
Yeah. Sometimes you still see requisitions on the spreadsheet. You think, still got to go. Still got work to do. Brilliant. Mate, thank you. This has been super, super helpful. And I'm hoping that anybody watching or listening has found it so. I'm sure that if anybody had any questions, that they'll be able to, that you'd probably be quite happy to answer any and help them through anything. We'll put your details in the comments, in the list here.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the point of setting up Scalr.
Nice.
It's really to sort of help support those early stage startups, scaling businesses who know that they need to have this, have a strategy in place for their ongoing success. So that's really sort of where I sort of operate, and I think I add the most value. So yeah, absolutely. If anybody has, this has struck a chord with anyone, and they want to know more, then I'm absolutely happy to have a conversation for sure.
I think the tagline for Scalr should be "Don't just wing it," because there's a lot of what early stage businesses do, isn't it? Just wing it,
don't just wing it.
We all make it up as we go along to a certain degree, like in life, not just in TA. But there are definitely things you can do to get your talent strategy on the right track from the beginning.
Yeah,
I think they're all things that you've given us some brilliant insight into so far. Mate, thank you so much.
Mate. Oh no, pleasure. And I think I was going to say, I'm just going to add. I think, and as you sort of alluded to earlier, I think that's why the sort of role of a like fractional head of talent. So I guess as opposed to sort of a part-time person, a fractional person, kind of really, for those who don't know, to my mind, fractional sort of work means that you're embedded in the business for an ongoing period of time. You're effectively part of the business. You have the company email address, and you're part of that team, but obviously just in a sort of fractional basis, a day a week, 2 days a week, whatever's needed. But an organization, yes, you said may not have the funding, may not have the need or the desire to hire somebody senior in a permanent capacity in the long term, but having someone on a on a fractional basis means that you get the benefit of that experience, but you can control the cost as well. And I think that's why we're seeing an increase in this kind of fractional working, is that the businesses get to benefit, but without that sort of that long-term financial overhead.
Yeah, and when you break it down like that, it makes complete sense, doesn't it?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool.
Perfect, my friend. Let's finish off with one question. I like leaving the toughest questions till last. What's for dinner tonight?
Oh, what is for dinner? I think we're going to have a chicken burger.
That sounds good.
Yeah, for a Monday. Oh, no, right.
Yeah, that's pretty racy. That question I was used to get asked by my mate Matt Hassey, and we always used to come off a call, and he'd always ask me, "What's for dinner tonight?" Matt Hassey's from Horsefly Analytics, one of our data partners. And it's just a really good question that just breaks the ice a little bit. But perfect, mate. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
You too.
Hopefully we'll see you in person soon. But for anyone listening, anyone watching, thank you. Enjoy. And Matt's details will be in the comments. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, mate.